Just before Christmas, 2019 in Ireland, in the early hours of the 14th of December, a girl named Amela Kulenovic heard the sound of things being knocked over in the apartment next door and screams from her neighbour. She went to the property to try to stop what she already imagined it to be, a couple's fight that was getting out of hand, but it was too late. As soon as she opened the door, Amela saw a man on top of her neighbour Nadine, punching her several times. She said he seemed so enraged that he was making growls like an angry animal and didn't even realise she had come into the apartment. Amela ran from the scene and called the police. Declan McCarthy, who led the investigation into that crime, said he had never seen such violence in his more than 40 years of service, a view also shared by the paramedics who attended the scene. Nadine's injuries were so catastrophic that she never regained consciousness. Today, I'm going to tell you everything about the case of Nadine Lott. Nadine Lott was born on July 24, 1989, in the town of Arklow, in Wicklow, Ireland. She was the daughter of David and Claire Lott, and was the second born of 4 siblings. There were 3 girls, Phoebe, Nadine and Tanith, and 1 boy, Kyle, who was the youngest. There is not much information about her during her childhood and adolescence. It's only known that after finishing school, Nadine took a technical course to become a beautician, and as soon as she graduated, she started working in that field. In June 2012, a month before turning 23, she went to Darwin, Australia. She was planning on staying a year there, which was the maximum length of her visa. A lot of young people go to Australia for a year to make new friends and acquire new experiences. Nadine began working at a beauty salon there, and during her stay, she met Daniel Murtagh. Daniel was 25 years old, also Irish, but from the town of Clondalkin. He had been boxing for many years since he was a teenager and knew how to fight very well. Nadine began to become romantically involved with Daniel, but despite starting to go out regularly, it seems that they never made it official. Even so, this didn't last long because the very next year, in 2013, they ended their relationship for a couple of reasons, including the fact that Daniel was not very open with her about his life. While he was in Australia, Daniel never had a steady job, and while he lived in Ireland, he lived at his parents' expense and always ended up getting involved in street fights, even having a few run-ins with the police. The other reason they broke up was because her visa was running out and she needed to return to Ireland. He said he was going to remain in Australia. Nadine returned home in May 2013 after her year abroad and considered the relationship a holiday romance. What she only discovered when she arrived in Ireland was that she was pregnant. She got in touch with Daniel to tell him about the pregnancy, and he was happy with the news, so much so that he told her he would organise himself to return to Ireland soon. Nadine then, for her daughter, gave the couple a chance. She wasn't in love with him, in fact, but she was willing to try something and see if love might blossom between them. But the first big blow happened at the birth of the couple's daughter. Kaya was born at the end of November of that year, 2013, and during the birth that had been scheduled, Daniel did not show up at the hospital and did not respond. In the following years, their relationship was what she described as up and down. Daniel appeared, disappeared. He helped her financially from time to time, as much as he could. The distance also greatly hindered the chances of something working out. Daniel's family lived in Clondalkin and Nadine's in Arklow. They were about 2 hours away from each other by train. In 2016, Nadine decided to take a big step in this relationship. It was now that she would see if this would work or not. And remember, she was only doing this for for her daughter. In August, Nadine managed to rent an apartment in Wicklow, close to her parents' house, and invited Daniel to live with her. He was unable to share the rent, but it was agreed that he would help with the household bills and especially with Kaya's expenses. He accepted. But on the day of the move, Daniel didn't show up. He didn't help her with transportation. He didn't answer her calls. He didn't respond. And this really upset Nadine. As soon as she was in the new house, alone with Kaya, she realized that she had to accept that life as a single mother and decided to end that troubled relationship once and for all. Nadine was an independent woman. She had her own job, her car, she managed to rent an apartment, and she alone could provide Kaya with a good living situation. Unlike Daniel, who apparently just wanted to enjoy life. Even though they went their separate ways, Nadine still wanted her daughter to have a relationship with her father. So she never completely cut off contact with him because of Kaya. Over the following years, Daniel continued to insist on having a relationship with Nadine, but she was always firm and said no. He was Kaya's father, he would never stop being her dad, and he would always be present in the girl's life. But in her life, as a partner, no more. From 2013 to 2019, they had a lot of fights, but Daniel had never laid a finger on her. But that would change in the early hours of December 14th, 2019, when for the first time and also the last, Nadine Lott ended up being a fatal victim of domestic violence. On a Friday, December 13th, 2019, Nadine, who was 30 years old at the time, had a birthday party for her aunt that would be held in a pub, and of course she couldn't take her daughter. But that same day, Kaya, now 6, had a Christmas recital to perform at school, and both Nadine and Daniel were going to attend. As he would already be in town, it was agreed that he would stay at her house and take care of her daughter while she went to her aunt's party. But at around 4 a.m. on the 14th, a neighbour of Nadine's called Amela heard the noise of things being knocked down, Nadine's screams, and went to the property to try to stop what she already imagined to be, but it was too late. As soon as she opened the door to the room, Amela saw Daniel on top of Nadine punching her neighbour several times. She said he seemed so enraged that he was making growls like an angry animal and didn't even realise she had come in. Amela thinks she didn't spend 3 seconds there. She ran away, went back home, locked the door, called the police, and then the only person in Nadine's family whose phone number she had in her address book, her sister. Phoebe answered that desperate call in the middle of the night, woke up her mother, and the two ran to the apartment. The two left in such a hurry that even in the cold weather at the beginning of the Irish winter, they were just in nightwear. Phoebe ran in slippers, and Claire, Nadine's mother, ended up going barefoot. When police and paramedics arrived, Daniel was no longer there. They found what was described as one of the worst crime scenes they had ever seen. The entire house was covered in blood. The smell was very strong. There was furniture overturned. Mirrors, glasses, plates, everything broken. Nadine was found in the kitchen, but there was a trail of blood from the living room suggesting that she had been dragged there. Furthermore, her face was unrecognizable. She was having trouble breathing because she was choking on her own blood. Her mother, who had already arrived minutes before the medics, was crying desperately on top of her daughter, trying to save her in some way. Maybe you're wondering now, what about Kaya? Where was she in all this? She was in the house the whole time and nothing happened to her. During the investigations, as well as during the trial hearings in this case, information about her was never officially disclosed, but they suggested that she was sleeping, which was not what actually happened. Everyone knew that with all that noise, It was practically impossible for her to have stayed asleep all night. The police managed to keep everything involving Kaya very confidential, but Claire gave an interview in 2021 where she herself talked about her granddaughter at the crime scene, and I talk about Kaya again at the end of the episode, but, as I said, nothing happened to her, nothing physical. Unfortunately, her trauma was psychological. When the paramedics started cleaning Nadine's mouth to help with her breathing, they noticed that some of her teeth were missing. The amount of blood covering the body was so great that they could barely identify where the injuries actually were. When the paramedics placed Nadine on the stretcher, they felt that Nadine's hair had lots of wood splinters and pieces of broken plate in it. Nadine had received such a massive attack that she was actually disfigured. She was also unconscious. There wasn't much to do there, and she was taken to the hospital. Daniel had fled in his car, but he was so disoriented that almost 30 kilometers away, he fell into a ditch, suffering only minor injuries. A driver who was passing by stopped to help, and he kind of blurted out or spoke his thoughts out loud. It's not possible to know for sure how he said it, but this witness claims that he clearly heard him say, "I killed my wife because she was getting with my friend." This driver called an ambulance, and a few minutes after Daniel received treatment, the police arrived to arrest him. Nadine spent her first 24 hours in intensive care in hospital. She was under observation almost all the time and received the massive amount of 42 blood transfusions. Because there were so many injuries, it was very difficult to stop the bleeding. The attack on her was so vicious that Nadine never regained consciousness in hospital, and 3 days after the attack, she lost her fight for life and died on December 17, 2019. At autopsy, it was identified that she had blunt force injuries caused by punches and kicks. A total of 64 injuries were found, including blows, punctures, broken bones, as well as suffering a brain injury. A police team interrogated Daniel in a process that took 4 days, and this process lasted all that time because his account of what happened was very slow. It was also quite confusing and contradictory. First, he said he didn't remember the attack, but he knew he had smoked a joint and drank a lot that night. He said he loved Nadine, and that he was upset when he found out that she, his girlfriend, was going out with a friend of his. Then he slowly released information. He said he had only given a few slaps. Then he said there were 2 slaps that later turned into 6 or 7 punches. He said that Nadine arrived complaining because he was drinking and smoking when he was supposed to be taking care of Kaya. So he got angry because at that time he had already put the girl to sleep. He became so angry that he punched her. When he saw that her nose was bleeding, instead of helping, he ended up punching her more. He said he doesn't know what happened from then on, but he knew he couldn't stop hitting. On the last day of his testimony, he admitted that he wrapped a tire pump charger cable around his hand to hit her, but insisted that he did not intend to kill her since they had just gotten back into a relationship and she was the woman of his life. The police asked if he had used a knife and he said no, but Nadine had a knife stuck in her body. During investigations in the house, experts confirmed that everything happened in the living room, as if she had first been attacked against the wall and then fallen when the attacks continued. They also had strong evidence that Daniel fled the room and that it was Nadine herself who crawled into the kitchen, where her cell phone was probably. Regarding the investigation into Daniel's past, people who studied with him at school said that he was a lonely boy who was not considered cool or friendly, who lost his temper easily and who liked to hit other kids, especially the younger ones. They also said that he didn't like being at school, and from a young age he started drinking and using drugs. It was in his teens that he started boxing. Daniel also had previous convictions from the police, 9 incidents in total, all involving abusive and threatening behaviour, such as fights in the streets and bars. According to Claire, Daniel was considered controlling. Even when the couple were separated, he was kind of invasively present in Nadine's life. There were calls, several messages. Kaya's maintenance money, for example, was generally given in person, and not because he wanted to see his daughter. Sometimes he arrived at a time when the girl was at school. He just wanted to see Nadine at inconvenient times. During examination of Nadine's phone, the police discovered a peculiar conversation between the two in a WhatsApp chat, and the messages were exchanged on December 5th, just 9 days before the crime. Nadine messaged him, "Nothing is ever going to happen between us again. I want to make that clear." Daniel replied, "What are you being thick for?" She said, "I'm not being thick. I'm just saying it as it is." Daniel asked, "Are you seeing someone from Dublin?" Nadine then said, "Here we go again. I'm not seeing anyone." Daniel said, "Okay, was there a Dublin lad in your place?" Nadine said, "Leave it out, Dan." He said, "Nadine, I worry about you. Not in love, just don't slip." Nadine said, "Don't threaten me either." Daniel asked, "How did I threaten you?" And she replied, "Just don't slip sounds a bit like a threat." Daniel asked, "Why are you pissed with me?" And she replied, "You rot me with this. Do you have Dublin lads in the house?" Daniel ended saying, "Down next Friday. Try to be a bit nicer than you are now. I shouldn't be worrying as much." On the night of the 13th, while Nadine was at her aunt's party, Daniel had sent her several messages asking her to come home soon, and she simply ignored them all. He called, and she didn't answer. In the WhatsApp records, there were 2 unanswered calls, one at 12:57 p.m. and the other at 1:26 a.m. So he drank, smoked, used drugs, and when she arrived, he attacked her. Daniel's trial took place in October 2021 and lasted 2 weeks. He pleaded not guilty to the charge that it was a premeditated crime, but pleaded guilty to manslaughter when there is no intention to kill. His defense emphasized that his behavior was due to drink and drugs. Everyone already knew that Daniel was guilty. There was no intention of finding him innocent. The jury, however, needed to decide if he was guilty of manslaughter or if he had the intention to kill. The verdict would be fundamental to the sentence that would be applied, life imprisonment or not. Chief State Pathologist Linda Mulligan detailed each of the 64 wounds on the victim's body. Several exchanges of messages between the two were also presented, messages that already discredited the information he had given to the police on the days of the interrogation. Daniel insisted on getting back together with Nadine when he had told the police that they were in a relationship. The prosecution put together their version, based on the belief that Daniel was obsessed with Nadine. At one point in his life, he had gotten the attention of that hard-working woman, but when he lost that person who could probably support him too, he lost his mind. As I said, Nadine was a successful woman. She had a job that she loved and paid well. She had her own car. She paid the rent on her own house. She gave her daughter a good life, and he was jealous of what she achieved without including him in that life. Although he said that Nadine was seeing another guy who was a friend of his, information that was partially confirmed by Claire, where she said that Nadine was meeting a local barber, but that this barber was neither a friend nor much less an acquaintance of Daniel. The prosecution preferred to rely on the version that the motivation for the crime was his anger at his ex-girlfriend's independence. At the end of October, the 12 jurors took almost 6 hours to reach their verdict. They unanimously found him guilty of first-degree murder. Sentence: life imprisonment. Nadine's funeral took place on December 22nd, 2019, and more than 1,000 people showed up to pay tribute to her. Even with Kaya's information being spared in the media and official documents, in December 2021, 2 months after Daniel's trial, Nadine's mother, Claire, gave an interview and confirmed that Kaya saw everything happen. She had woken up to the noise of the fight, the screams, and she saw her father beating her mother. Kaya told the psychologist that she screamed and begged her father to stop and not kill her mother, but Daniel continued. Today she has night terrors and cannot stay alone for long at night. Claire also said that Daniel's name is not spoken in the family home. They avoid talking about him as much as possible, but when they do, they refer to him as the monster. They don't want to know anything about him, where he is, how he is, nothing. She also added that when Nadine was buried on December 22nd, it was just 3 days before Christmas, and that Christmas in 2019 was the saddest for the entire family. Today, Kaya is under Claire's legal custody and will likely undergo psychological counselling for many years to come. In January 2023, Daniel featured in the Irish newspapers once again. On January 18th, he was attacked by another prisoner who left a huge cut on his face from his temple to his chin. The prisoner who committed the attack was immediately restrained by prison officers. He was separated from the other inmates and is now facing disciplinary proceedings. Daniel's cell was changed, and he avoids being alone in rival groups for his own safety. It appears that the attack occurred as a result of a group fight in the prison. Daniel has a tendency to stay in dangerous groups in prison, and the attack was an attempt by a certain group to establish itself at the top of the hierarchy that exists among inmates. Claire was contacted by the press by phone to give a new interview and talk about this situation. She refused, but only said that he was reaping what he sowed. We express our deepest sympathies to the victim's family. If you've made it this far, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to this channel. Also, add your opinion in our comments. Thank you very much. I will see you in the next case.